Hey, good evening, everybody, and thanks for joining us on Sabbath Rest Book Talk. My name is Erin McCole Cupp. I'm the author of the Jane E. Friendless Orphan series and also the editor of the Image and Likeness anthology of short fiction and poetry related to the theology of the body. And tonight we are talking about conscious here on Sabbath Rest Book Talk, where fiction is good for you. We're going to talk about some stories that show us the development and the functioning of the human conscience, because as humans, as far as I know, we're the only animals that actually have a functioning and developable conscience. I say that, by the way, speaking of animals, my dogs are over in a corner here. So if you hear barking because one of them ate my headset, I apologize. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce my other co-hosts here this evening. Carolyn Astfalk. She is the author of Rightfully Ours, a spicy, clean YA romance. Carolyn, why don't you say hi and tell us about some of your other work?
Hello. Yes, Rightfully Ours is one of my 3 contemporary Catholic romances, the other 2 being Stay With Me and a Christmas romance, Ornamental Graces. And other than that, I do some writing for Catholic Mom and here and there, wherever they'll let me blog.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining us, Carolyn. We also have Rebecca Willen, who is editing for me right now a book on the 9 Ways of Prayer of St. Dominic, but she also has some other exciting news to share since we last saw her 2 months ago. Rebecca, what would you like to tell us about your new digs?
So I just started a position as associate editor for the Catholic publishing company, Our Sunday Visitor. So I am in the big leagues now. I am officially an editor and having great fun and working on Erin's book, which is long overdue because the Lord decided to dump a major life change on me with literally no warning. So yeah, welcome.
Well, we're really, really happy to have you with us, Rebecca, and happy to see you moving on up. Carolyn, our baby girl is growing up. What are we going to do? Well, speaking of growing up, that's an excellent segue into our topic for this evening, which is the human conscience. So we've got 3 fantastic books that we're talking about, 2 classics and 1 indie, soon-to-be classic. We're going to talk about Tom Sawyer by Mark Twain, who has the best birthday ever, by the way. I was born on Mark Twain's birthday. Anyway, also, we're going to talk about Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi, which until Rebecca recommended Pinocchio, the book, not the Disney.
I recommended it.
You did? Wait, Carolyn, was it you?
No.
I blame Rebecca then, because usually if a book comes out of left field and it's fantastically good.
It's my own fault. I hate that book. Why did I recommend it?
You hate that book? Okay, well, now we're going to talk about it. Well, anyway, we're also going to talk about A Subtle Grace by Gable, but now I want to talk about Pinocchio, okay? Because as reading Pinocchio, I knew there was a book before the movie. I did not realize how drastically the book differed from the movie.
Yes.
I really don't like the movie Pinocchio. I don't know why. I just don't like it. Maybe it's because when I was in 1st grade and they're doing the Jesse tree thing at Christmas time, like at Advent in the church, all these symbols from the Bible. This, the apple tells about the fall of man and Adam and Eve and blah, blah. And the rainbow tells about Noah and the ark and the covenant. And here's a whale. And that symbolizes somebody who got swallowed by a whale. Children who got swallowed by a whale. And of course I rose my hand in mass and yelled Pinocchio in front of the whole children's mass, because apparently I didn't give people enough material to joke about with me. Anyway, so Pinocchio. Oh my goodness, I am Pinocchio. Am I the only one who got that feeling? Like my conscience only really bothers me when the consequences are bearing down on me and my life has become awful.
Yeah, for a puppet, he was surprisingly human in his frailty. It's just like you read it and you're like, oh my goodness, Pinocchio, get it together, buddy. You said you weren't going to do this again and you did. And it's like, well, yeah, I kind of do that too, huh?
Yes.
Okay, fine. You're better people than I, because I just get irritated at Pinocchio.
Okay, so Rebecca, what don't you like about Pinocchio?
Well,
since you dislike it so much, can you give us the little nutshell synopsis of the book Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi?
So the book Pinocchio is about a puppet who I think he actually wants to become a real human. I'm not entirely sure how much he really wants this. But it's basically the story of a puppet experiencing the world and having rather Grimm's fairy tale-like adventures, and eventually sort of growing up, and then becomes a real human boy as a reward for his eventual good actions.
Okay, yes, which that does sound like the movie, but the book was so much more fantastical than the movie too, I thought, which I think it's darker. Yeah, that's why I don't like Pinocchio, the movie, and why I like the book, because the book is darker. Because it's much more violent, and the cat's biting off its paw, and all this other like gore and scary and ridiculous, and it's absurd. Like, so much of it is absurd. I'm
very deliberate when I say that it's very Grimm's fairy tale-esque.
Okay, so do you like Grimm's fairy tales?
I appreciate Grimm's fairy tales, but they're also shorter, and they don't make me read the same person getting into the same trouble for 80 pages.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So you want something that is like the main character is actually learning something along the way, as opposed to making the mistake. Okay, I gotcha. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, I also have a problem like watching people do stupid things consistently.
Are you like me? You couldn't watch The Office very much?
I can't watch most comedy. Like, I can barely stand the I Love Lucy show.
Oh my goodness, Rebecca, you're hilarious.
I know.
I watch The Office because I just like cringe to like, oh, I've said stupid things too, and yeah. But exactly. All right, Carolyn, what was your take on Pinocchio the book?
Well, again, I was struck by like, wow, this is dark, and this is nothing like the Disney-fied version of it at all. And it made me think of Alice in Wonderland a lot of times with the fantastical, like, boy, this is just weird. I wouldn't say I loved it, but I liked it, and it did. Yeah, I mean, I could see me in that too, and poor Pinocchio just not getting it right. When you talk about conscience, here again, Disney like makes Jiminy Cricket like this big deal, whereas in the book, it's the talking cricket. He's not so big a part. And what really struck me is the first interaction between Pinocchio and Disney Cricket, he kills him with the back of a shoe because he doesn't want to hear that conscience. You know, I don't remember that in the Disney version.
But isn't it funny? He kills him, but he keeps coming back anyway.
Right.
I'm like, oh yeah, that's a conscience. Because that's something we do as humans. We try to kill our consciences. I mean, I know I do it, but I just have so much cognitive dissonance that eventually it does get to me. But you know, I know we've all seen people who once upon a time had guilt, but then they bought into this thing that all guilt is bad, and therefore they've convinced themselves that having a conscience is a bad thing. I know, anybody else know people like that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and it's what I liked about Pinocchio is that he kept trying to kill the conscience, but eventually it came back. And it's that, like Rebecca, you said that he, you know, does he really want to become a boy that badly? And like, as you were saying that, I was hearing, do I really want to get to heaven that badly? Or do I want to
do my own thing?
Like eat another piece of cake, gluttony, you know, or whatever your particular sin du jour is.
That's actually a really good point. And that's something I hadn't thought about as I was reading it. Because I tend to, with that book, like oftentimes I can like really get into the book. With Pinocchio, I like kind of was standing apart, observing and getting frustrated. But it's a good point. It's like it is very real. It is what we do as humans, and it sometimes takes repeated encounters with grace for us to actually make the change.
Did anybody else catch the symbolism of the girl and then lady with the blue hair?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was pretty screamingly obvious. Okay, so Captain Obvious here caught it. Yay, that's nice. No, I really liked Pinocchio. I was surprised at how much I liked the book.
That's good.
Thanks for recommending it. Any other thoughts on Pinocchio?
It's just that my only memory, because my mother read this aloud to me when I was a kid, and my only memory from it was that A, I didn't like it, and B, he got swallowed by a whale, and that's literally all I remembered.
Okay.
So I am honestly surprised that I remembered enough about it to recommend it or suggest it for this. Whatever.
As I'm reading it, the whale was a dogfish, so I'm sitting there wondering, is that where Dogfish Head Brewery gets its name from, Pinocchio?
Oh, right?
I don't know.
That's very true. See, illusions are a beautiful thing. I also, okay, the reason I originally, when we were brainstorming for this year, last year, the topic of conscience actually first popped into my mind because we had just finished an audiobook of Tom Sawyer, which I had read I had read the book a million times when I was a kid, just because it was one of the paperback copies that we actually owned in the house. But it's sort of like, I read it when I was a kid, so I didn't really appreciate the growth of Tom Sawyer through the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then hearing it in the audiobook, Carolyn, we had the same narrator.
Nick Offerman from Parks and Recreation is excellent. I would be riding around the car laughing, listening to it. I'm thinking, I didn't realize this was so funny when I read the book. It was great.
That's the thing. I always tell my theater students, because I'm trying to get them to love Shakespeare as much as I love Shakespeare, that our brains are actually not wired to read. We're not created to read. Whenever we read, we are doing something impossible because we are looking at silent words and turning them into sound because it goes through our language center, not our visual center. So that's why I think it's so important to have work read aloud to you, or hear it or read it aloud to someone, because that's when you can get the funny stuff, because so much of the humor comes through in the nonverbals. So yeah, okay, and if any of my theater students watch this, then see, I don't just harp on it to you, I harp on it to anybody who will listen, or even people who won't listen, like my theater students.
It's pretty cool. I keep see squiggles on paper and, imagine a whole other universe.
Yeah.
Pretty fascinating.
It's an amazing thing. But okay, so conscience, in Tom Sawyer, what I didn't notice until we were doing the audiobook was how much Tom changes, even though he's still a kid by the end, how much he changes from the beginning to the end. And the real test for him is in the cave, I think, because he starts out toying with who was his girlfriend before Becky?
Oh, Polly?
Oh wow, we're all see that poor girl. Nobody remembers her name.
I want to say it's
Rosalind. For me, it's Rosalind. Nobody remembers Tom Sawyer's first girlfriend.
Amy.
It was Amy. It was okay.
Oh, that's right.
He's just kind of tossing Amy aside, and then basically tossing Becky aside, and just going off and doing his own thing. And then when he's actually called upon in the cave to take care of someone besides himself, he's still a child, but he still rises to the occasion, albeit in a childish way. But he still rises to the occasion. And I guess maybe as a parent, this is the first time I noticed that. I'm like, oh wow, look at what Mark Twain did with this kid. I was pretty moved. Yeah. Give us some other thoughts on Tom Sawyer.
I guess thinking as I'm listening to it about conscience, really at the beginning, I'm thinking, man, this kid's conscience is so dulled from all the little things he pulls on over everybody every day, on his Aunt Polly and on his schoolmaster and everybody else, that when it gets to the important stuff, I'm like, I don't even know if he can pull this off. He can't even recognize all the stuff he's doing that's wrong. But he does eventually, and you do see that growth. It's not like Twain takes us through his inner process, really. It's just, you see, like, okay, so he does know right and wrong, and there's still some conscience left for him to pull upon when he needs to do the right thing.
Yeah. One of the things, as I was going through these books and thinking about the theme of conscience, it's interesting how, kind of looking at how both Tom Sawyer and Pinocchio, like what actually helps them develop a conscience. Because in Pinocchio, it's very much the external advice that he doesn't really listen to, but eventually comes in contact with enough consequences of his actions to kind of begin to appreciate the advice. And I think in Tom Sawyer, it's more of that like encounter with evil to a certain extent, like the Engine Jim. And kind of those encounters with, basically encounters with evil, and in the case of the cave, it's more of danger than anything else. But it's not so much, I think, with Tom Sawyer. I can't remember if it's really seeing the consequences of his actions or if it's coming face to face with what could be. I don't remember.
Kind of, I think the consequences of his inaction is what seems to move him, and he realizes that someone else is going to suffer because he's not willing to speak up.
Right.
Yeah, but it's funny, like, as we're saying this, both Pinocchio and Tom Sawyer, the turning point takes place in some sort of tomb.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, pretty sharp. Not just decorative, functional too. And that's like, I think that's why stories like that are so satisfying, because what we're always looking for as humans is we're always looking for some sign that this is not the end. That if we get through the awful stuff, all that conflict in the story, all that conflict, leading to Jesus's death, that in the end, if we suffer through it, there's a resurrection at the end, that big denouement, that big change, that big, things are not the same anymore. That's what makes a story so satisfying inherently, I like to think. And so, like, now we're talking, as always happens whenever we do Sabbath Rest Book Talk. Like, I'm thinking back on Tom Sawyer. Like, Tom Sawyer didn't really have much motivation. He didn't really ever voice that he wanted to be good, that I can think of.
No.
Pinocchio kept saying, I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good. I'm going to be good. And then he's like, maybe not. And goes and, becomes a donkey, or loses his money in a field or whatever. Tom Sawyer wasn't like that at all.
Yeah.
Except, go ahead.
Tom kind of wants to do his own thing.
Yeah. And why is that? Like, what makes him so different from Pinocchio character-wise?
I think because Pinocchio to a certain extent comes into the world already as an irritating 10-year-old. Or possibly 12-year-old. Tom has knowledge that he chooses not to fall back on. I mean, he's in Sunday school every week. He has an aunt who's trying to teach him how to be good. He's got, like he has the structure, but he's choosing, whereas Pinocchio is kind of learning from the basics. Like, he's starting out on a blank slate, essentially.
Okay.
This isn't at all following from what you said. It was just something I
you know what? Now that you're saying it, also, like, Pinocchio knows he wants to change.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Sawyer has no idea that any change needed.
Yeah, he sees no reason to change because he has fun.
Right, where Pinocchio knows that there's something not right with him, that he's not what he could be, but he keeps falling short of getting to that place where he could be something else.
Right.
Until the end. And then, like, at the end, it's both that, I think that's what I found so satisfying about Pinocchio was that he became human through penance by serving his I keep wanting to call him grandfather, by serving his daddy, his Papa Geppetto, whatever you want to call him, that it had to be voluntary penance. Like I'm going to choose now to work to, serve my father who can't help himself anymore. Mm-hmm. Whereas Tom always had somebody covering for him, like Aunt Polly. Oh my gosh, she was. What are everybody's thoughts on Aunt Polly?
She wants to do right by Tom, but I don't know if she's totally invested in it. Like, she wants him to turn out well, but I mean, the kid's gone like from his room every night, like all night long, wandering cemeteries with dead cats and whatever. And Polly's just clueless.
Yeah, she's pretty ineffective, really.
What makes her so ineffective? Is she just clueless? Is she just not sharp? I mean, like, what's the mechanism? Because, like, as a parent, I'm like, oh gosh, please don't let me be an Aunt Polly.
Well, I think maybe she's dulled her conscience too. Doesn't she have some introspection where something comes to her attention and she's realizing, oh, I do need to, do this or that, or I have to do right by Tom and this. But she has these little quibbles that kind of reminds her that maybe she's not really being the pseudo, the surrogate parent that she needs to be for him.
And I think it's also too that there's a disconnect. The relationship between Aunt Polly and Tom is one that it doesn't have the closeness that would allow her to really have an impact on him. It's almost more like she is just, it almost feels like she's a glorified housekeeper.
Yeah, that does highlight how important it is to like establish an actual relationship with your kids, not just somebody who tells them what to do, but somebody who is invested in them as people.
Right. Because otherwise, I mean, how does the kid know that there's less reason for the kid to pay attention, essentially. It becomes just, do I choose to follow your rules or not? Right. Can I get away with not following them?
Yeah, because he never, until like he's faking his death, he doesn't really have any, like, I think faking his death is the first time he sort of thinks, oh gosh, maybe I'm hurting her feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe she has feelings. Maybe I should have feelings.
It's interesting too, then what part do parents and family play in the formation of conscience? And you see that in both of those, and in A Subtle Grace too. I think it becomes clear that the conscience is sometimes not just in me, it's not just what God put in my heart, it's what other people, tell to me too.
Yeah,
that's talking cricket or whatever.
And which is a perfect segue. But go ahead, Rebecca, you go first.
Well, just one of the things that is consistent in all three books is that's one of the ways we develop our consciences, is it's not just like seeing consequences and realizing, okay, I don't want to do that in the future, and so then you kind of have that knowledge stored, but it's also listening to the people around you that you should be able to trust for advice on how to act in a situation. And it's so then there's the discernment of knowing who to trust for conscience and then actually following that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Oh my goodness, look who just joined us.
Hello.
Hi there. Allison is joining us she is one of the chief wine pourers for Women in the New Evangelization. Can I call you that?
That's perfect. Oh my gosh, wait till I tell Kelly that. That's perfect. I'm a wine pourer.
Wine pourer, yes. I think that's very fitting for Allison. Allison also has a website called Reconciled to You and a ministry, really. And with a name like Reconciled to You, isn't that a perfect guest to have on for what's it called? What are we doing here? Sabbath Rest Book Talk tonight. I'm like switching gears because wanted to welcome Allison as soon as possible. We didn't get a really good chance to talk about the book that we're giving away tonight, which is A Subtle Grace by Ellen Gable. Really quick rundown. That is a historical romance, late Victorian, beautiful clothes. I love clothes. So, you know, the clothes in there, and it's the conscience issue is the main character, Kathleen. She has to choose whether she wants to, it's kind of a love triangle-y book, okay? Does she want to go after the handsome and dangerous son of the police captain, or does she want to go after the good doctor? Go after the good doctor. Anyway, so it's a great book, and I highly recommend you read it. I had a lot of fun reading it. So yeah, if you have a North American mailing address, please comment below or comment over on the side. I think it's either on this side or this side. Comment live if you got a North American mailing address. If we don't have a live commenter before we close up here, then we'll keep comments open until May 31st, and we will announce the winner at our next Sabbath Rest Book Talk. Anyway, so yeah, comment. Allison, thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
So yeah, our chief wine pourer is here, and with tonight's focus being conscience, we wanted to invite you to join our conversation, especially because of your work with Reconciled to You, which is all about that everyday practical spirituality, the place where the human conscience really gets its work out. What role do you think conscience plays in the development of a real life workaday world spirituality?
I think it's like that nudge, you know, like I think like left amok, I would make a mess of my life. In fact, I was just looking in my journals the other day. The good thing about journaling is that you get to go back and see where you were 10 years ago. The bad thing about having journals is you get to go back and see where you were. And so I found
relatable.
Super, right? I went back and I found the funniest comment. I wrote, "I am humbled daily by my idiotic behavior."
I saw that I think you had it on Instagram earlier this week. And it's because like I heard it in your voice.
It's like I had to share that. I'm like, I can't be the only one. So this was 2007. So I was about 40, and I was still making idiotic decisions. Now I think it's my conscience that saw that in the last 10 years, those nudges, those those feelings of that was probably not the best thing to say. That's probably not the best thing to do. And then you keep coming at it with prayer and bringing it to the Lord, going to confession and saying, "Guess what I did again, God?" And he's like, "Yeah, I already know." But he's like, I know. But to kind of build that conscience over time, I think that we need that nudge from the Spirit that says, "That wasn't your best move." And for you to recognize it and go, "Yeah, you're right." And to, instead of suppressing it and getting sad and despairing and thinking, "Oh, I'm such an idiot. Why did I do that again?" Bringing it to the Lord in prayer and in sacrament, and in reading the scriptures, I call it the grace trifecta, and just really seeking the Lord and, to build our conscience in the everyday ordinary, because that's where we make our mistakes and make our successes.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned like the power of sacraments and the prayer life in scripture. And in our greater secular culture where those three things are seen as irrelevant, we'll often hear people say things like your conscience is the equivalent of as long as you're happy, as long as it's good for you. If it feels right for you, then just do it. And we also, like we were talking about it earlier in the show, we hear people tell us, put aside that Catholic guilt is bad. What is so bad about Catholic guilt, do you think, in our culture's eyes? What makes it this, put it aside, it's bad?
People don't like to feel bad. I have a son who is the most honest, sweetest, kindest, gentlest young man. But when his back is against the wall and he's going to get in trouble, he lies. And it blows my mind. I'm like, where did that come from? And I really think it's this people don't want to feel bad. They don't want to admit that they have idiotic behaviors. They don't want to get caught at doing something. And that part of them, temptation is tempting because there's some good in it. There's something that makes us feel good. And so we're drawn to temptation, and they want to be able to do this good without feeling bad. And of course, our faith, the Catholic faith, it nudges you to see that it's not good for you in the greater sense. And so people want to put that aside and ignore it because then you can't do what you want.
Right, but it always catches up to us in the end, like Pinocchio with his long nose, and Tom Sawyer with his the trial towards the end, and in A Subtle Grace with Kathleen going after the wrong guy, it endangers her life in so many ways. So it's in contrast, the Catholic worldview promotes this active formation of a healthy conscience. What do you think might be some ways for everyday people like you and me who want to do what is right and get a good formation for a healthy conscience, so we have a good idea of what we need to be able to sniff out as bad for us, even if necessarily after we do it?
Well, I kind of alluded to it a little bit. For me, it's about prayer, sacrament, and scripture. And I guess I call it the grace trifecta. We need God's grace, his undeserved yet freely given gift of his Holy Spirit within us. And with the best three ways to get there is through prayer, sacrament, scripture, and how they're expressed or participated in the everyday ordinary of our life, like just praying about every decision, bringing our mistakes to the Lord in reconciliation, but also going to him in adoration and receiving communion and really calling upon our baptism, because in our baptism we are sealed and we have that grace abundantly available for us to turn to really seek God's will. And I think that's probably the hardest part, is that God's will and our will don't always line up, and what we want to do isn't always what God wants for us, because he's good, he's love. God is love. That was in today's gospel. God is love. He can only be love, and he can only will what's best for us. And so to understand that about him and about what it means to live in the everyday ordinary through prayer, sacrament, and scripture, I think is the best way to build kind of that firm foundation of conscience and faith.
And it's interesting that you bring up today's gospel of that God is love and can't be anything else. And I was reflecting on that today, that we often hear that in our culture that love is love, which kind of means like love is what I feel like saying it is, where another side of human existence and reality says that love is willing what is good for somebody else, not what feels good for us.
Yeah.
And that's to me, that's kind of that's an arm of the conscience as well, to make sure we know what love actually is. And that sometimes, go ahead.
So that's something that we experience in each of the books as well, just to pull it back to those today, is the connection of love and conscience. Because it's acting out of love that is our good actions, and listening, and our conscience can have a role in how we love others. And the two of them go together and have to. Just to form the conscience, and then for the conscience to form our actions towards others.
Yeah, that's really good. That is really good. Before we, one more question for Allison, actually. Do you have any recommended read? We've been talking about our books here tonight, not our books, other people's books. Do you have any recommended reading or apps on the subject of conscious development, either fiction, nonfiction, or, app-based?
Well, as far as books, this author is Robert Wicks, W-I-C-K-S, and most of his books, I think, are from Franciscan, and he has got a fiction and a nonfiction. Well, he's got many nonfiction, and they're all amazing. They're all spirituality, and he is a psychologist, so he really comes at things in a really great way if you understand them, very cut and dry, just beautiful way to form your conscience. But he also has one called A Conversation with a Guardian Angel, which is a fiction book, which I really loved. One on virtue that I loved was Maria Johnson's Supergirls and Halos. That's out from Ave Maria Press. Right. That would be a very good choice. When you're talking about apps, maybe you're talking about mine.
You have an app? Tell us about your app, Allison.
Words with Jesus, which is, I think, still available on Android. It may not be right now on iOS. Long story. Just know that sometimes developers disappear on you. So pray about that. So that would be those would be my suggestions.
Maybe he got swallowed by a whale, or went on a tour of a cave by candlelight, or went to Atlantic City. He may have disappeared in a book, or she may have disappeared in a book.
That's funny.
All right. Well, I try. Allison, where can our viewers find out more about you and your work?
Well, Reconciled to You. I'm everywhere on all social media. My website is Reconciled to TOYOU. Also, as you said, I do work with wine, women in the new evangelization. You can find them at CatholicVineyard.com. I help run their book clubs. And my new show is called Faith in the Everyday. It's a Facebook Live that runs Mondays, 12:30 p.m. over on Facebook, but it also runs as a podcast afterwards on Breadbox Media.
Oh, cool. Congratulations. What's the name of that again? Your new show?
Faith in the Everyday.
Faith in the Everyday. Awesome. So everybody go ahead and watch that. Allison, thank you for joining us tonight. We have a live commenter. Oh, we have 2 live commenters. Now I have to go to random.org and select a winner. Somebody who wins a copy of, what's it called? A Subtle Grace. Really, Gable. Sorry, I'm trying to like spin plates. I should have kept random number generator.
Just don't go to random title generator at this point.
Oh, no. Okay, so our big winner is it is Barb Shishkevich. See, if you need to know how to pronounce her last name, it's Barb Shishkevich. See, as soon as I say that, I say it. Anyway, Barb, congratulations. You are a winner of a paper copy of A Subtle Grace by Ellen Gable. And congratulations, Allison. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Everybody go check out all Allison's stuff. Anybody else have announcements or so? Oh, I have an announcement. I have on my newsletter, I'm going to have a, once I finally get my newsletter done, which should be hopefully this week, for goodness sakes, I have a free short story about Kate and Jean's first date from my novel, Don't You Forget About Me. So it's going to be their first date. It's what happens after, at the end of the first date. Waggle of the eyebrows here. So I do encourage you, haven't already, go to ErinMcColeCupp.com and subscribe to my newsletter, and you will get that nice and tidy in your inbox. You'll also get quarterly reminders to join us for Sabbath Rest Book Talk, but you can also sign up for monthly reminders with the link, just live, ready to go. Just click and view. Sign up for that through my website. Anybody else before we have a good evening to everybody? All right, have a good evening, everybody. Thank you all. We will see you next month.
Thanks for having me on.
Yep. Thanks for joining us, Allison. We'll see you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Have a good night. God bless. Potato chip. Potato chip.